This pandemic scenario has impacted the life of everyone in some way or the other. So, in today's episode of Top Talk, we have with us Saloni Kaul, founder and CEO of India Talent Services, to tell us about her experiences and the best practices that can be followed in terms of managing employees during this scenario. Just to tell a brief about Saloni's talented career throughout, she has been in the business for 30 plus years. Saloni is an HR business mentor and entrepreneurship coach with over 30 years of experience in leadership consulting, coaching, mentoring, and training experience. She founded India Talent Service in the year 2012 to provide strategic consultation for various HR domain requirements of companies located globally. Prior to starting her own venture, she has worked in various leadership roles globally in companies like Dell EMC, Tata Consultancy Services, Tata Infotech, just to name a few. In 2013, she was awarded with the Best Business Plan Award at the 10K ISB Goldman Sachs Women Entrepreneurship Program. In 2019, she started Uran It's Time to Fly, a business capability building program for fellow entrepreneurs. She is also an active member of the Startup Leadership Program and the General Secretary of Faridabad Management Association. A very warm welcome to you, Saloni, on our today's session of Top Talk.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure and honor to be here today.
So, Saloni, before we start off, I would love to know, you have been serving the industries for such a long time, right? And this kind of scenario, the pandemic scenario, is something which most of us have not even experienced in our life throughout, right? So how do you think this has impacted the life of the employee and the performance of the employees in the organization and affected their overall productivity?
Yes, absolutely. The last 18 months, if I can call it that, approximately, we are going through very, very unprecedented times. And this zone is still expanding, right? We don't know when this unprecedency, will actually, come to an end.
Right.
No one had really imagined. No one has ever had this kind of an experience before, because the last pandemic was almost 100 years ago. But what we do understand is that no matter well prepared, I'm sure that probably some of the bigger corporate houses would have said, okay, start of April 2020, this is what my business is going to look like. This is what I'm going to do in the next 12 months. But we all know that the execution just got washed away because no one was prepared. No one had ever imagined that, this is going to happen to them. So any performance planning that they may have done would have actually not met its due execution. And of course, employees, right? But I also know of organizations, and especially client organizations, who rose against the odd, who tackled what was really in front of them, who managed their time well. And what they did was they basically re-strategized, they rebuilt, they reworked, and many also pivoted. Like we know of so many cases where people have pivoted their businesses to do something else using, their existing infra. Right. But at an employee level, at a humane level, there was fear, right? Organizations are, entities, right? But the people who work there are obviously human beings. And there was a lot of fear, not just of jobs and security. It was basically fear of life, fear of, their own wellness, because, you could see so many, people losing lives also, right, in this pandemic, in this last 18 months. And when you are insecure and when you are not, sure of, you are going to be there, your loved ones are going to be safe, you basically then get this overwhelming feeling, and obviously that has an impact on your performance. And then when you hear of other organizations letting people go or whatever, you also believe that, we don't know what is going to happen with us. What is our future really here? So employee performance definitely dipped, I'm sure. But I also believe that then towards the end of the year, the last year, second half, there was this, when you started to look up, you saw business growth figures, you also saw economic environment improving. You also saw that the existing employee performance started to go up. There were more job openings. So one could see that, things were getting better also. And then we had the next wave, right?
Yes.
While this has a lot to do with, like for certain business domains, things could have been very hunky-dory because, essentials to sabhi ko chahiye. But when you talk about employees moving from now working from homes, because almost everyone resorted to that. Whatever possible was there, people started working from home. But now, after again a long period, even that has kind of lost its charm. So accepting the people are still fearful. They don't want to go out. They don't want to step out. ऐसे भी बहुत लोग हैं. But then there are many of those also who now are feeling this need to socially connect in person, because just doing Zoom calls, it can be very fatiguing also. And then when you don't have these face-to-face communication, when you're just working through your virtual platforms, that also has its own set of challenges. So definitely, I would say all of these have definitely impacted employee performance and engagement. And yes, there are so many proactive measures that organizations are taking to make sure that they are able to recover that and increase that.
Yes, one point that you mentioned, Zoom calls can never never replace the face-to-face conversations that happen, right? The nitty-gritties of it, the emotions attached to it. It is virtual is okay. We can see the faces of other people, but the emotions and the connect, that doesn't happen. Bondings don't happen over Zoom call.
Exactly.
So yes. So and another point that you mentioned, in the beginning of the pandemic, when work from home started taking place, right? So at first it was like employees were excited to at some point in time, because they thought that the commute, they don't have to do it. They can sit at home and then work. But at after certain point, this acted as the devil, right? Because the isolation took over everything, and as human beings, we are social beings. We cannot live in isolation, so the problem started arising.
Yes,
So
absolutely. I was taking so many sessions last year and continuing into this year of how can you work from home. I had a webinar especially for working from home,
right.
where we talk about holistic life living, talking about how could you actually use your 24 hours better, so that you were not like, because when you look at the office and your personal life, the lines were getting blurred. When the personal time became official time, and when the official time continued well into the day and into the night, it was like we are like working 24 hours, because there was actually no clean cut off lines.
Right. So in this scenario, when this start of the boredom started and the feeling of isolation started, what do you think are the best proactive measures that leaders can take in order to eliminate this sort of feeling, and can ensure that the performance and the productivity of the employees remain the same, as well as their mental well-being remains stable?
I know of organizations who have been working very hard on enabling wellness programs, making it available to their people. In fact, for the last almost close to now a month and a half, I've been running a program that's called the Showers of Compassion, under which we offer a variety of programs like doing listening circles, compassionate listening circles. We're looking at doing compassionate healing sessions. And there are so many ways in which, it's not just me, there are many other people who are part of this social work that we're doing to help people, especially who are impacted by COVID. These could be frontline people, these could be people who have themselves got it and, still struggling with it. Or these could also be the caretakers, right? Who are tending to, patients, or probably they have lost their loved ones. So on the wellness side, yes, all big organizations actually are concerned about the mental well-being. It has picked up a lot of, attention. It has picked up a lot of even urgency, that this is something we do want to, cater to. We do want our people to come back to normalcy, come back to their, normal productive self. And this one aspect actually is very important. So as far as performance is concerned, in fact, when people started to working from home, there were organizations who had already gone digital, and for them it was very easy because probably they're all IT organizations. But then when it was when we were talking about manufacturing or retail, there were so many other sectors where this kind of easy transition didn't happen, and therefore when you are totally cut off from your employees, when there is no way of you all except calling them and checking on in them, how do you actually get them to start work when you're not even able to connect with them? Whether it is virtually or whichever way, you're not able to actually make a connection with them. And in the same context, I remember doing a webinar last year. We had done it for even HR folks of Nepal. I was invited to speak there. And we were looking at how do you actually call out their need to ensure that employees actually have the necessary, let's say, IT infra arrangement, right? So do they, can they actually make a place, a corner in a room where they say, this is my working space, just like the way we do at, the working, our own offices. Then training them, how do you work from your own home? How do you actually have these breakout times where you can engage with your family so that, your family is like, what's happening, right? You are at home and you're not talking to us. And
Right.
they also appreciate that you are at work, right? How do you actually manage those interruptions, not distractions, but interruptions at work? And then how do you get the best out of your day, especially, with this office and home timing blurring? But I guess what's more important is for an organization to like cater to this. Also, it's important that, with all the, let's say the highs and the peaks and the valleys that are coming as far as the business is concerned, what is the organization looking at when it comes to employee performance? Because if the organization is not clear as to what is it that they want their people to do, how can they actually place their expectations up front? Suddenly things have changed now. So clarity of what's happening, clarity of what people are expected to do, that is first. That is very important because you want to make sure that the employees are feeling fine. They're not, they're not feeling anxious. They're not having any anxiety attacks, and all is well at home. And then comes, okay, let's move on and see, okay, how can we now pick up from wherever we dropped our work, and pick up our work and start looking at, okay, what is it that we want to do this month or this quarter, or we make a 90-day OKR, and then start checking on what's working, not working, what do they need, what kind of check-ins. I had created certain checklists also, which I had shared even on my LinkedIn and also with my clientele organizations. These are things that the managers need to be asking their people on call or whatever, so that they are able to actually, pick the pulse, understand what's happening with the employee. Don't be like so much focused on the work that the employee feels that, my organization doesn't care about me. They just want me to work and deliver results. So be empathetic and do these check-ins because it's important. I remember coming out with a 3R strategy. So, innovating and executing strategy effectively happens when you engage your people. Now that the environment changed, how can you get your people to engage, even though they're not at office, they're at, let's say, at their home? So when they start contributing with these suggestions, exactly that's when you can, get them to expand, get them to really, you're actually leveraging their brains, actually getting them to give you answers or solutions, which probably as, me, single person can't come up with. But if I'm interacting with 50 people, my people, and I'm talking to all my 50 employees, I'm bound to get, a lot of ideas. So, so Vijay Govindarajan, he's basically an innovation guru, and he talks about a very simple and a very proven method for allocating an organization's resources. So he says organizations' energy, organizations' time and resources, when you allocate these in balanced measure, that is what he calls the 3 boxes. So I came up with the 3R model, in parallel to this framework, the 3-box framework, and in which the 3 R's stood for restart. So the first start, restart. So manage the present because the times have changed. So manage the present and support the core business with this in mind. So this is what an HR should do: manage the present and support the core business with this in mind, which champion mindset, health and safety of its employees, Manpower, re-engagement, how do you re-engage? And then let's look at exposure assessment. Do we have any exposure? Do we have anything that we need to be careful about, which we need to take care of? So we start with these 4 things in mind. This is when the lockdown was opening up and organizations starting to then again get back to work. The second R was recover. So forget the past and focus on people skilling, people re-engagement, re-envisioning your future, involvement, so innovation through involvement of people, and business continuity processes. So this was the second R. The first was restart, the second was recover, and the third R was reinforce. So reinforce by creating the future. So converting breakthrough ideas, wo kahan se aayenge, from your people. So convert those ideas into new products and businesses through strategic innovation, creating value and impact, and of course, differentiator. Because why should your business do well? Only will do well if you are creating a differentiator. So I believe that, when you look at a problem for too long, only the problem remains. But if you stop looking at the problem and start looking at the solution, then you actually start, innovating and coming up with something which is new. And that's why I use this, creating endless possibilities for you.
That is a great insight that you shared, the great model that you created, the 3 R's of it. And especially, in this time, it becomes difficult. The path becomes hazy for most of the people because of all the things that goes on in the surrounding. I think the model that you proposed, the 3 R's, will help people to focus, shift their actual path from not only focusing on the problem but to the solution.
Yes, shift, need that shift.
Yes.
Keep gazing at the door that has closed. How do we look at what being? Probably that's how do we do that?
Right, that is great. Now you mentioned about check-ins in your answer, in your previous discussion, right? So, check-ins, for not all the employees are open to the idea of check-ins because some are shy, some are not very interested in talking to everyone. But check-ins is also very necessary for keeping the well-being of the employees, right? So I would like to know from you, what is the ideal frequency of check-ins according to you that will be effective in not only managing the performance but also the mental well-being and the overall well-being of the employee and the business itself, but not become burdensome for the managers and the employees both?
See, it's but natural. The place of work has changed. The work hasn't changed, the relationships haven't changed, the goals haven't changed, or probably mildly yes. Everything else is the same. So if you were at work, you would actually talk to your people, right? You would not talk to them after a couple of days. You would check in with them every single day. So check-ins are the call of the day. You need to check in with people every day, because how else do you know what's happening? And how else do you know what's not happening? How else do you know what is it that the person needs help with? So it's important. And for performance checking, right? So one is just checking, informal. Right now, you talk about formalizing feedback. You talk about a regular performance check-in. So I think that can be once a week when you basically sit down and say, hey, this is what we were supposed to deliver in this week. So let's understand where are we. And though you already know where the person is, actually you have, as a manager, as a leader, you have actually a great control of your time. I'm even more productively because everybody is working on their respective things. You are just checking in to say, hey, sab theek chal raha hai. What's not working? Where are you getting stuck? And things like that. So because if you're not, so see, people are not meeting or not interacting like you would interact the whole day sitting at work. You would say after every a minute or two, you would be interacting with someone. But then some, in a work from home situation, that may not be it. So everyday check-in is important, and probably even like minimum once a day, so it's important, I would say.
do you think in this context that there should be some like customizing check-ins facility available in the organization? For example, like as I mentioned, like all the employees are not the same and all the employees don't need check-ins at the same frequency as everyone, right? So should the organization have some provisions, where they can actually talk to people and then decide on whether they need regular check-in, or they can make certain provisions where employees can voluntarily join into the check-ins discussion?
I believe that the culture of the organization will really determine the usefulness and also the acceptance. If you want to do something new and it's useful and it is accepted, great. But when you try out something new, the better thing is to pose the situation, say, okay, how do we do this? And let people actually contribute and say, okay, we could do this, we could do this. How do we ensure everybody is, not feeling isolated? If this was a question that the manager posed or HR posed, and then people contribute, say, okay, we can do this. So some way the answer, the solution is coming from the employees, from the people. And then that becomes much more acceptable, other than the HR saying, okay, here is our weekly Friday, let's do this party, or, it's like a force. So instead of doing that, it's better to ask them, what do you want? Where can we help you? Or what is a better way? So when you like set out a theme and say that, we've noticed this and we want to really reach out and help people who may be feeling this way. You're not telling them you are feeling this way, but who may be feeling this way. And do you think this is a good way of doing it? Or do you have any other suggestions? So somewhere you also get a feel of how, the response of the employees. And then you can accordingly modify and then launch it.
Right. Great. So everything comes down to the culture of the organization, how good or how well they can preach the changes to their employees, right?
And how proactive they are.
Yeah.
Proactive they are. They're really proactive and they really want to do all this, all this stuff to, keep showing up for employees, showing them. I mean, even if you're not like showing up physically, but you are there in a sense that they're hearing from you. It is regular communication. Because if the employee doesn't hear from the organization, doesn't hear from the manager, doesn't hear from the colleague, doesn't hear from HR, doesn't hear from the leader, then he says, "Mere ko akela chhod diya." So I mean, that is the sense an employee will get. Or you'll say, okay, nobody's checking on me, I can enjoy my time. See, it can work anyways.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So in this context, another thing that comes to my mind is feedback plays a very important role in a scenario like this, when, especially now than before, right? When all the people are away from each other, and feedback plays an important role in keeping them connected, not only for improving the performance, but also in order to like keep connected with the other people that are working in the organization. So how important do you think it is now to formalize the feedback process if it was not formalized before?
So regular check-ins and feedback. So one is informal and the other is formal. And again, if it's not done before and suddenly we start doing it, again, it's also a question that an employee may face and may think that, I'm not trusted. They don't trust me. So you have to do it in a way that doesn't come across as, oh, this is a way of them trying to control me, or this is a way of them trying to, judge me, evaluate me. So I'm a people advocate. So I will say that do what actually will be accepted. And though as an organization, you will always do stuff which, is important for the growth of the organization. It can't happen without people, and it can't happen without people's buy-in. So yes, anything that an organization does as a process should be formalized. But instead of just formalizing it and giving it to them, first talk about it. First make them familiar with it, so that it is not like, it comes out of nowhere. They already know that something of this kind is going to come their way in a day or two or a month or a week or a fortnight. So they're like ready for it. And yes, by all means, formalize it. And so, the best way to formalize a feedback system, especially when in the context of work objectives, in the context of goals and priorities that you have given to your employees, every organization has their own way of doing it, right? No two organizations do it the same way, right? So their way of setting goals, their way of managing performance of their people, everything is different. So let us understand that performance management, of which feedback is one part, is basically a two-part interwoven process, in which the first part is basically all about setting goals. And then the second is about your regular ongoing conversations. So instead of just calling it feedback, we can call it regular ongoing conversations. See, and then when you look at goals, and right now we have OKRs really picking up, a lot of interest and attention. It's important to set the appropriate cadence, which means that I'm doing this for 90 days, right? So I always recommend that when as an organization you are goal setting, follow some kind of a tracking system, and you can do it, or you can follow a dual tracking system. So dual will mean that you have quarterly goals, which are short-term goals and which you will review, every 90 days. And then you should also have annual goals, which are keyed into long-term strategies that are deployed in parallel. Because not everything will get done in those 90 days. And some things that you want to get done will get done over this 12-month period. And something that will happen by the end of the month, you could actually have some small things in your 90-day, and then the bigger things will actually be the bigger annual OKRs or annual goals, whatever you want to call them. So I believe that you can use the system and making sure that you have somebody who is making sure that people are really devoting time to choosing what really matters. And if you do too many also objectives, for let's say the shorter term, so don't commit to more than 3 to 5 objectives, because I think that is enough. Too many will just dilute and they will just scatter, away the efforts of people, and then you will not be able to accomplish much. There is so many things that you need to look at. So I think we should look for objectives which have the most leverage, and people are able to actually deliver outstanding performance.
That's right. Not only increasing the quantity, but it is very important to focus on the quality instead, right? Like adding too many objectives won't do any good to the organization. Rather, it can do bad. People can have their focus, changed and shifted to other things which might not be so important on rather than where they should have invested their focus on. And
right. Metrics is so important. Whatever if it's not measurable, then it's not doable. So, and then how do you evaluate it? And then on what do you give feedback? So feedback is important, but all the work that comes prior to it also needs to be given a lot of emphasis and importance.
Right. Saloni, there is another question, when you mentioned that all goals need to be measurable, and like whatever cannot be measured cannot be evaluated. But we have seen in many organizations where they evaluate employees, like at the time of the final performance evaluation, what they do is there is another criteria which comes into the play is the competencies which we talk about, right? And the competencies are mostly subjective in nature. So my question to you would be, what are the, parameters, certain parameters that can be added to these subjective aspects to make them, more measurable in nature, so that the accuracy at the time we are getting at the time of evaluation is greater?
Right. Interesting question. And what I have done and recommended to my clientele organizations is that when it comes to competencies, you look at where is this person, which level is he on when it comes to that specific competency, because not every person should be, analyzed or evaluated for that same competency in the same way. Let's say you have a head of the a function, let's say presentation skills have to be at a level of 5 on 5. But then when we look at somebody who is, a junior, or, is somebody who's not required to give presentations, but then at least should be able to give presentations. And for him, even a 3 on 5 would be good enough. So we call them threshold competencies. So this is the threshold. This is the minimum. And then with your role and with the requirement of your role, what is the level that you should at? That is determined. So that's how any competency framework actually gets developed. So you have what you want to really, make sure that everybody in the organization is good at these competencies. And there's a minimum level, that's the threshold, and then there is that level at which you need to be at. So whether you need to be at 3, at 4 or 5, because below 3 would mean that you are not really great at it, you're missing some parts of it. But even if you're missing some parts of it, it then gets captured, and you can probably create a development plan, a learning plan for that person, for him to then go into the next level. So, and then when it comes to assessment, so this is where like setting the parameters. When it comes to assessment, again, the way that it can be done is that here's a person who is able to do it, but with supervision. Here's a person who can do it, but without supervision. So that's also another way of assessing. Then here's a person who can do it, and he can probably help others do it also. And then here's a person who can do it, and he is at the guru level. He's like a master in that area. So he can actually train and do many things on that particular competency. He can actually enable other people to develop that skill. So this is another way of self-evaluating. Where am I? I'm on level 1, 2, 3, 4, whichever level I am on. And then, but he is being evaluated for that threshold, or for that the minimum level that he should be on.
I think this measurable parameters which you said adding to the competencies will actually be very beneficial for the organizations as well. And as you mentioned, like defining what is what, right, in case of competencies is very important, so that the rater who is rating can actually understand based on their assessment and see the definition of the rating, right? That is also very important.
What is a competency? It's not just the skill, it's also the knowledge. Right. So when you actually write down the competency framework, it's like he should have knowledge of this. He should be skilled at this. And this is the attitude that he should have towards it. So it's like KSA, right? Knowledge and attitude.
Right, absolutely. So the last question that I would like to ask you is a shift from the employee's point of view to the organization's point of view. So my question to you would be, what are the key questions that an organization must ask its employee to get a better feedback and to understand their positioning in terms of the employee's life?
Okay, which is like it can be through an employee value proposition. That would be one way. It could be by basically doing an engagement survey, where an anonymous survey in which you can get employees to really put down, on a scale of 1 to 5, what do they feel about certain aspects of the organization, starting with leadership, starting with then going to quality, or going to, goals and their immediate manager, rewards, learning and development, any other parameters which they really want people to throw light on. And then when people start rating it, then they will say, okay, I agree with this. I extremely agree with this. I disagree with this. I extremely disagree with this. Or I'm neutral. So those would be basically the 5-point rating scale on which they would then answer those statements. They're not questions, but they're basically statements. So these would be, I would say, these are two ways in which organizations can actually capture what their employees are thinking about.
And most of the time what happens is they do this survey, the organizations, but don't act upon the feedback that they receive. I think acting upon it is also a very important part of it, right? In order to understand what they are like in terms of the employee's perspective, right?
Exactly. See, the surveys that we conduct, we are able to actually pinpoint to a manager level. If he has at least 5 reportees into him, we can actually give that, okay, this is the manager's report. This is how his team is behaving. This is how engaged his team is. So we know exactly where the issues are. As an HR, I can say that, okay, these are the managers we need to look out for because his score of his people's engagement is low. And then that manager then accordingly needs to work with the team. And the beautiful part of doing this engagement survey is that we share the feedback with the people. And at an organization level, of course, it goes out to everyone. Then at a manager level, each manager is then, that's the recommendation that I give out, that sit with your people, understand that, of these were the areas of concerns that came up because they were the low scoring ones.
Right.
What would you like to see happening? That's the question. What would you like to see happening in this space so that you believe that, yes, we as an organization can improve? Right. And of course, when you're doing the original survey also, while it is all rating on that scale, you can also have some open-ended questions where you just have a box where people can answer the questions. Okay, what do you like best about this organization? And, what is it that makes you come back to work every day? Or what are the things that, you just despise about the organization, which make you feel that you don't want to stay on, So you can have those kind of questions also, so that people then can just express themselves freely. They're not bound by a rating scale. They can just say what they want to say. And that also gives you a lot of food for thought.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Saloni, for sharing all these insights. Though we came to an end with this question, but the views and the insights that you shared today regarding the 3 hours model or running a parallel OKR and having a greater goal management system for maintaining the performance of the employees, the trial and error method where we experiment with the goals and at least finally come to the conclusion what works for our organization and what doesn't. Regular check-ins, both formal and informal, and terming and not using the term feedback, instead using regular conversation, right? Yes. So all these things I hope will create a lot of impact, a good positive impact in the organizations who will be watching this and can take some views from here and implement in their organizations as well.
Thank you. And just to end, kind of sum up, especially because we're talking about performance and we're talking about results, it's important to maintain focus and commit to priorities. Right. And that is at the top level. If you are, maintaining your focus and you are committed to priorities, and then you are aligning and connecting the team. You're telling them, why is this important? Why is this goal important, right? And you do it in all hands. You're transparent about all goals, right? And then asking for accountability. So having this continuous reassessment, providing honest, objective grading, and started at the top. Keep it timely, keep it relevant. Frequent check-ins, progress updates. Because when you have updates, you can easily correct something. But if you do it after too long a time, then so much water has already flown under the bridge. Doesn't really matter. So you can have weekly one-on-ones, you can have monthly departments, you can stretch, right? And when you're stretching, sometimes people have these stretch goals, right? So make sure that you are able to distinguish between this you have to do, this is 100% you have to do, but then this is a stretch goal. This is like, your bold, hairy, audacious goals, which we call BHAG. So then just make sure that you are the 100% doable and the aspirational goal. They are, distinguished, and then the aspirational goal can actually then move on to the next performance period also, maybe the next 12 months. So I would say, look at this and enable your managers, enable them to actually learn the art of coaching. Because once you become a manager coach, you actually help people solve their problems like this. You don't have to give them solutions all the time. They are able to actually solve problems.
Great. Couldn't have concluded it better way. Thank you so much, Saloni. It was great talking with you and you sharing all these experiences. It was lovely interacting with you.
Thank you. Same here. I enjoyed this conversation too.
Thank you.